Johnson. I did a research project with members of the Nez Perce tribe, specifically the children of Nez Perce jazz and big band members from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and into the 50s. We worked together to get the story sort of into writing and then published in a collection called American Indian Performing Arts Critical Directions. It was published in 2010 by the UCLA Indian Center Press. So today, earlier today, I gave a presentation on the research I did and showed a lot of photographs. And tonight is our opportunity for some of the children of the band members whose photographs we looked at today to come up and tell stories about their memories of, you know, growing up with these musicians, and then many of them becoming musicians themselves. So I'd like to welcome those that are going to come up and talk. First, I'd like you to meet Silas Whitman. Si, if you come on up. Silas was really the mover and the shaker with this, who really said, you know, I want to get this story told. And I'm so glad he's here with us. I'd like to invite Loretta Pinkham and her sister, excuse me, Loretta Halfmoon. Forgive me. And her sister Shirley to come up if she would like to as well. And, you know, if you want to get closer, this is just going to be very informal and casual. It's a chance for them to get to tell stories that they don't often have the opportunity to tell. And we're really lucky that they're willing to share these stories with us. So I do encourage you to come closer and then ask them questions that you may have also. Let's see. Loretta, do you mind scooting over toward Silas, and then I'll take this end spot and give you all a water. Okay, good. And then I wonder if maybe we could just start and go down the table. You could introduce yourselves and who your family member was in the bands, and maybe tell which band it was they were in. And some of your favorite memories that you have of your family members' experience in the band. And we'll kind of just go down the line, if that's okay.
My name is Silas Whitman. My father was Tony Whitman. He was a member of the Nez Perceans, about the second rendition that evolved from the early 20s. And he was a musician that could play different instruments, but he concentrated mainly on trumpet, and he played piano. The early versions of the Nez Perceans, they had names, went from Uncle Ty, Titus White, Connie and Torchy aren't here, but their father was the one who brought these people in front of them, and they started with the, they went from Chief White and his 5 Redskins to the Redskins, different variations, to try to get some sort of commercial approach that would allow them to be unique and to fit a genre that most people were aware of and, oddly enough, were comfortable with, so that it would allow them to get work. In obtaining the work, as they were soon to be noted, they were all musicians, as well as entertaining the way that they can control it by wearing war bonnets. Jane Williams was the piano player in the early band. She would dress in a buckskin outfit. Today, you know, some people would not probably look at that as indicative of, it'd be like stereotyping and be indicative of reverse racism. But in those days, to survive, in order to play the craft that you were familiar with, they used that as a way of thumbing their nose at convention and using those innate skills that they had, Fox was one of the preeminent drummers, was known. Their relationship with the black musicians who were shunned even more than they were was by far away a respect for their musicality. And my father would always tell me, as well as Uncle Fox and Uncle Ty, they would drill it in my head. They'd always say, the musicality. There are many gifted musicians among our people and among the various families. They've never had the opportunity or the ambition given to them to go out and show those skills in front of a crowd or to entertain people. It took a different approach, and they would tell me there were a number of families that had people that could play various instruments that were astounding musicians. They picked up, a lot of them picked it up. They couldn't speak or write or read English, but they would be able to transpose that in their mind and hear it, and they would be able to hear maybe something from somebody else who was a musician as such. They would pick it up and play it back, and they would hear that, and so they were taught the basics, and they took it from there. And then some of them went on through boarding schools and so forth, and they found that that relationship with the numbers and the music allowed them then to teach themselves music, and then later on they had teachers who were themselves inquisitive enough to where they would then really work with them knowing that they had a special skill. So I think there's probably just about every family among our people has someone who's a gifted musician. The daunting task was of Fox McCormick, Titus White, my father, Roy White, these others, to come together and to represent themselves and get other musicians who had equal talents. And they said, in order for us, this is what I'm paraphrasing from what I was told as a little guy. In order for them to show that they were the best, they had to work with things, take the music that was out there, classical pieces of music, orchestra pieces, and take and transpose that into a way that they could control and make it sound good, but also, this is in the days before they had recording studios, mixing, putting things on top of it, matching that up, going further and mixing it. They did all that themselves. They're like Beethoven or Bach, where they could do that in their head. And I would watch these gentlemen, the house that I stayed in Lapway in my early years were just across the field from where these ladies lived. And they would come together, and I would remember the cigar smoke, the cologne, and I would sit there, and they would be sitting late at night doing sheet music, transposing, making things work and harmonies, and they would talk, somebody would maybe have an instrument, and they would play a little bit. No, it's got to be like this. They all knew each other's pieces, but they would allow each other to go out and to practice that themselves. This is, again, with no studios. They did it all in their brain, in their mind. And then they coalesced it and put it together. So oftentimes they would rehearse. The rehearsals weren't like, well, we've got to practice for a month before we can go out and play. No. It'd be just a few days, sometimes hours. And they were the consummate session musicians. They were the consummate. They could take and get something, and within one or two takes, today what takes maybe 2 weeks to do one song, they could do in a matter of 2 hours about a dozen songs and lay them all out and say, well, we'll do this one here. Each time we do it, we'll make it better. You couldn't tell the difference, but the song that Shirley was talking about, Mood Indigo, String of Pearls. Some of these songs are, one bar would be a song within a song. You'd have to think how far out you make these changes. You have to be a musician, besides being an entertainer, besides knowing how to play something that people would like to dance to. That was amazing to me later on as I got older and I started playing myself. And I didn't want to take music lessons because I wanted to play ball or something like that. And so it was influences of Thai and Fox to another extent, but Roy White showing me that the jazz chords are all in your feel. And I said, how do you do that? He said, you have to be able to listen to those things and play them through your mind and your memory, and you have to feel it and then play it. If you have a keyboard and you can touch it, that's when it started telling me about things in their mind. It said, okay, this is the relationship they had with the black musicians, with the Garners and the Hamdens and the Callaways, that they all have had a very close relationship with. 9th, 11th, and 13th chords are all in the spread of your hands. So within those things, they knew all these shortcuts that are the backbone of what's called progressive jazz today. They knew all that. Way before it became a craft in itself. These gentlemen were amazing that they're able to look at all these things and do it. They were probably 30, 40, 50 years ahead of their time. And the story that these ladies have, as well as the White sisters, about their dad, about how they would share hotel rooms with the black musicians in Portland because they were shunned from staying in these places that they could play in. They wanted to do music, but they didn't want them or even their money that they earned. But the tribal guys could do that, the Nez Perceans. And so they would share rooms, share the floor, so to speak. Then they would share their skill and their craft. That's how you build up a style. That's how you build up your own personal style. All those lessons I took in and I listened, and it never ceased to amaze me to hear this music that they would sit down and crank out, from anything from the old music of when Paul Whitman first formed his band. He started out from a small group, then got up into, moving, and you hear that music today in New York and at Broadway plays. You hear these same things, these same music. People think, oh, wow, that's really hard to play. These guys were playing that to practice, to amuse themselves. They were playing these things. The drum licks that Fox McCormick would do, he wouldn't look at his drum set, he would listen to it, and he'd be able to take that and move his sticks in a way that he wasn't a left-hander or right-handed drummer, even though he was a lefty. He was able to move that and move that around and turn the beats around. That hasn't been done until just lately, to where it's become a part of the craft that you teach. The schools, like the Buddy Rich School of drumming music, they do drum lessons now. Fox could take that and actually play it, how he knew how to play those different rhythms. I think about that, and I used to ask Dad, so how did these guys how did they know how to play these things? And I can see them all and hear them. I can hear them in my mind, as well as smell the cigars. Bill Stevens Sr. always had those cigars. I'll play the house, and my mother would say, oh, you gotta air out all the doors, open the doors and windows, because it's just full of cigar smoke. But like the McCaddy girls, they should be here. Their father, Abe, baritone sax. That takes an immense strength to play that thing in a big band style. Each one of those instruments had a special place in their arrangements. The other people that later on, the last Nez Perceans that were playing full time, Dell played guitar He was taught how to play rhythm guitar in big band style. With a Junior Penny, your dad, Duke Kane, and Roy.
Yeah, Duke and Roy.
Those four were the last ones that played, and Dell would play with them also, and Leroy would sit in once in a while, but they were the last ones to play commercially. And the thing that amazed me, they taught themselves by listening to the radio to play some of the jazz classics now. That the Cal Jader band, for example, you know, some of those things that he did in the bossa nova style, they picked that up. They actually played the music that became the big city equivalent of being in some of the clubs. They, I heard them play some things before that I'd heard only in my travels in the East Coast, how they knew to play those things. And I think that was the closest that they had, I know, with some of the Hampton people and some of the folks that would come around from time to time that would actually come and see them. And I'd ask them about that. I asked Duke Kane about that, and he just laughed. He said, yeah, I said, we help them out once in a while. They have a question about how to play something. I told him, where did you learn to play that? He said, well, listening, playing with other people, sit in. He said, that's where you learn. As my mentors, that's what they said. You go in and you become your own session musician. You sit in all these different music genres. Never turn your nose away from that. That's what he was told by the older guys that were in the Nez Perceans. You listen to things in country western music. You pick up some of those. The lyrics. However you transpose the lyrics around, you can always make the melody work. It was amazing. It was like going to a university of music, listening to these gentlemen. And hearing them all play. And then as I got older and I realized in some cases, like Shirley was saying, traveling with them. I remember playing as a little guy, kind of like my grandson Dawson, older than that, I was a toddler moving around. I was playing in a kitchen in a box, a food box, about half the size. And I remember sitting in there. I remember eating a lamb chop. It had a little cover on the leg. And my mother and I were back there. And later on, I got older, and I'd asked my mother before she passed on. She said, what were we doing back there? She said, we weren't allowed to go out in front to where they were playing the music. We had to stay hidden, sight unseen. So that was something that was practiced in the 40s up to the 50s. In some places, even here locally, close by here, it was done to us even in the 60s. We could play, but we weren't allowed to hang around. Here's your drum chief, beat it, you know. That type of thing. So that was kind of a thing that I was too little then to really know what that was as far as a form of racism, institutional racism. Yet by the same token, I don't know if you ladies remember the stories talked about Central Ferry, Lions Ferry, big pavilions out in the middle of the desert. Big pavilions out there. And these guys would drive out there and set up their instruments and everything. And by a couple hours before the dance started, all these trucks, pickups, Model Ts, Model A, whatever the Model A's, would all be showing up. All local ranchers and farmers would pitch in and pay to have the Nez Perceans play in these remote places. There'd be hundreds of people at these dances. And they would just have a rip-roaring time. And that's how, when I was talking outside earlier, that's how Joseph, Oregon was. Literally, the Hell's Canyon Dance Hall was a very appropriate name. And the lady that ran across in the bar across the street in the gold room, Her nickname was Big Red, Irma Tippett, and she was like Miss Kitty in Gunsmoke. See? And she ruled that street with an iron fist. And so we would go we'd drive and we'd go just to listen to the Nez Perceans playing there. And by that time they got down to a combo. Then later on, it graduated, we formed a rock and roll band, so the original Nez Perceans played the big dance hall, then the smaller group went over to the Gold Room when Irma took it over. And we played a rock and roll dance then in the Hell's Canyon dance hall. Irma, being the businesswoman, the Miss Kitty of the town, she saw, wait a minute, all these kids are spending all their folks' money. There's a lot of young people in their 20s, early 20s. For some reason, there's a whole bunch of them. It come from Baker City, La Grande, Enterprise, all the little towns around there. All you'd see, just be cowboy hats, caps out there, and so she said, I got an idea. She says, I want you guys to come in and play. It's evident to me that Nez Perce started playing some rock and roll songs. Crowd ate it up, and my crowd got younger, and they started spending more money. You guys are 21, aren't you? You better be. You've been drinking in the bar. Yeah. So we started playing. Place jam-packed. All the 20-somethings. She opened up her side doors, and she says, I'm running out of hamburgers, I'm running out of fries and chips and pop. So, wow, where are they eating it at? She says, not them. She says, you guys don't take a break. One break, that's it. We're gonna play all the way through, and we'll pass the hat if we have to. Opened up the doors in the whole street. They closed the dance hall across there. They had a country western dance. And all their musicians came in and were sitting around us having a good old time. A couple of them wanted to sit in with us, but by that time they were too well lit up. So we had a whole big street dance as well as a dance inside. And so we had this whole big thing. And they kept coming up with wanting this song, that song. I said, hey, these guys have got some knowledge of some of the music that comes only from places like Portland and Seattle. And they liked the non-commercial stuff that we were playing. And to this day, I see some of the folks over there, they say, we miss those days when we could actually hear music that was something that was told to us was only if you go to the big city and hear it. But you guys brought it over, and so we got to hear they call it old-time music, the big band music, Dixieland. Then you heard from rock and roll from us, and then today now it's called country rock, but it's the same thing. Then we played a lot of progressive stuff and a lot of the drinking music, as they called it. So they kept bringing us back, and the Nez Perceans were the ones that created that whole ability, that appreciation, and thriving on the musicality of people. Because we would bring different folks in to help us out from time to time. And even guys that didn't play, we recruited them to come in and help us. I think Art Rubin will tell you a story. We took him to a dance one time as a driver, one of our mules, to help us load up our instruments. He and a guy by the name of Bobby Williamson, call him Bobby Coon. They thought they were going to be there just drink and go have a good time and drive us back and forth. We had some kind of a deal we were doing anyway, so we ended up making them get up on the stage. We said, it's all you got to do is follow this. This key, and follow, just let your hands follow. So they end up doing one whole set actually. There's about 4 or 5 songs, and to this day, they still look back. Art says, I got to play a rock and roll band. So it wasn't 3-chord, it's 2-chord progression. That's all he was doing up there. But he started getting into it. Says, you have the talent. Why don't you teach yourself? Why don't you get something? I never thought about it. I guess I do. So you tell him about that. He'll tell you the story. I think that was in Kamiak where he made that happen, because there was I think it was a big brawl going on outside, and we had to go out and help stop it. But there's a lot of things like that this person would tell us, some things you can do, some things you can't do. So they were really our mentors in helping us. But the one thing I'm saddened I never really did was to take off and learn the music, to be a full-scale, full musician. Learn that craft the right way. Never did, but those gentlemen did, and that's probably a good point to jump off and let Loretta take it, because she's probably knows about that, how these guys picked that up. Schools, I guess, and some other ways that they did it. It was beyond me, but they were so skilled, it was just, it wasn't even funny. I mean, these guys were just amazing musicians.
It probably is something that all the musicians that played never took any, there was no music. There was no music or anyone to teach them, music, to play the drums, to keep time. We had members of the band that wrote the music. They would listen to the radio, they would listen to the songs, and they would write the music according to what they heard. And my dad, as a drummer, would just follow them. He would start it, and he would get the rhythm, and my dad then would tell him, this is a beat, and they all agreed. There was no real one leader that directed the band. There was always the drum that made the time, the horns, the saxophones, the trumpets, and my Uncle Ty was maybe one of the writers for the music, but it took time, and they would stop, they would go, and they would stop, and they would go again, and that process was taken over, by all of them. I remember my dad having to go to Ellensburg, and somehow, they would travel from different places. Sometimes they didn't even have a car. They had to borrow a rig to take them, the instruments. And I always remember my dad, we lived in Lapway next to the railroad station. So all of the guys, they would hop the train. I don't know, at those days, this is how they traveled. They would go back east, hopping the train, and borrowing instruments over there to play, and then hopping the train back. But that's the way that they were able to travel, from Lapway to Seattle to up the coast. They loved going up the coast, because the train hit all the places that they wanted to stop and visit and meet other native people that were helpful to them, whether they would put them up for the night or if they would, feed them, because sometimes, they went many places without, any funds. They just would play for their food. They would play for, extra kinds of things, their rooms. So it was something for them to just hop on a train and head back home. I know when my dad had the group, and we lived with my grandmother, and it was like we were always around, but we were never in the room when they were practicing. We were always in a back room or outside. you know, not seen by the guys, you know, that were there practicing. So we'd have to be in a kitchen, or we'd have to be in the back room, because they wanted almost kind of total, just individual help for each other. You know, they would tell us, you know, it's time for you to go to bed, you know, but how could you go to bed when they're all playing in another room? But I always remember my dad, he would just tell us, you know, they would all preach to us, you know, we want you to learn how to play, because, you know, we're having to play here without the music, you know, and when you grow up, you know, you're to play an instrument. My dad was really, I guess, you know, trying to let us all know, you know, the children that he had, the nieces and nephews that were there, you know, we all had to play an instrument. And I guess that's what we were all able to do. You know, I have Arthur Taylor here got to go to Tokyo to play when he was here at Washington State, or at Washington State College. And my niece, Terry, she got to go to Tokyo also, and Loretta. They were able to go to different countries because they were familiar and knowledgeable in music. So had our parents, you know, had what we have had in music, you know, no telling where they could have gone. I have pictures of my dad up here on, you know, with the guys. They love to take pictures, and there are pictures that my sister has of my dad where they were traveling on a train. You know, they're standing next and riding the train. But they were able to take a lot of pictures, you know, wherever they were going. They'd bounce on something, and the cars that they traveled in were really something. It's a wonder they were able to hold them all. You know, they're 4 or 5 guys in a small little car, little truck, and then besides that, their instruments. You know, had to get in the train too, or whatever they were in, had to pack everything. So that was really something for them to be able to still have a band. I remember going to Joseph, Oregon. We talked about Joseph, and everyone from our community knew when the band was going to play over there, and everyone would head over to Joseph, you know, or wherever they were playing. They would fill the buildings because they wanted to listen and hear and dance. I guess that's one particular, I guess, you know, what they like to do is hear and watch people dance. And so the music was something that we could dance to, you know, as young as we were, you know, that was something that we really enjoyed, you know, hearing and watching the adults dance, and then later on going to a dance that my dad and the orchestra was playing in. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk about, you know, some of the things that we were able to do. And I know that there are larger pictures. One familiar one is the dance band with the war bonnets. You know, that was something that they love to, in particular, show off. A lot of the saxophone players, didn't appreciate having to wear them because they needed, space. If you're familiar with playing a saxophone, you got to move around, and when you're wearing headgear, that was kind of annoying, for them to have to wear it. But when they traveled to Seattle, to California, to other reservations, they enjoyed going there, and the community of that reservation really enjoyed, hearing them play. I think there are other bands on other reservations, and it's, I guess, if someone else, would do a research, they could find those other bands that were similar, to the Nez Perceans. But, my dad, he really enjoyed, having his children play, and then especially his grandchildren play music. So I guess that's all.
Great, great. I wonder if we could open it up to questions from you all. If you have questions you might want to ask. Harold?
I'm not aware of any recordings. Are there any recordings of any of the Nez Perceans?
We had some recordings, the old reel-to-reel, that got burned in a house fire. There is an archive somewhere, and I don't know where that's at, of the big band, the Nez Perceans, that played. And somebody had one at Lapway. I don't know anymore who had that. They had it for a while and were told that they had this tape. But Muslims don't have anything, do they?
What about any of their music that they transcribed? Is any of that left?
The stuff that I recall when I was a little guy, that they were all working together, because there was about 3 or 4 of them who could collaborate and write down the transpositions. That was in, I know that we had, meaning my father and mother and I, and we were in Pendleton, that house fire burned up those tapes as well as all that sheet music. They had original sheet music that they took and they transposed some of that into modified renditions, things based upon what kind of instruments that they had. And so they made those changes on that, and then they would actually redo. Most of the sheet music had a front and back, and then they had an insert. And they would make new inserts, put it in there, and so they, just like keeping 33 LPs, they had these boxes. They're under the stairwell, and those were all burned. And I think that, as Shirley indicated, I think that Del White may have some of those in the old house. He has some that's there, that's been there for quite a while. But we've asked them, and he's, I don't know, somewhere. He just will not, he won't give it up. He won't give it up. Old instruments, the mutes. A lot of that he has, he has some of the original stuff that's there.
Well, Connie, I think Waters had some from Uncle Ty, and he's the only one that, he lived at the Senior Citizens in Lapway, and he was, when he had gotten ill, and in fact he had a heart attack. That's how he passed away. But people went in there to his place, and not knowing, some of the things that were there, took and destroyed them. So we lost all of what he had.
Other questions?
What are the possibilities of resurrecting Nez Perce jazz?
A lot of it has to do with the genre of music that you want. You know, the music and there's music. You can put yourself out of business awfully fast as artists if you don't want to commercialize yourself. When we were together, Uncle Sam stepped in and started breaking us up. In those days, they drafted people. So we lost 3 of our group that immediately. We lost our guitar player, our drummer, our sax player. Of course, then other things, and we refused to bend to top 40. Didn't want to do that. And we were told by others outside of our own group, our circle, that if you're going to be true artists and be true to your calling, you stay with it. Then I had a full appreciation of what the Nez Perceans actually accomplished. Because they went with a commercial music, but they turned it to fit what they wanted to hear and how it sounded good to them. And they sold that as entertainers to the public who ate it with a spoon. I mean, they loved it. They loved them. And so to today, we probably have, you can count them on your fingers, in one hand, people that can cross that line. It takes exposure. And right now, we don't even have a school band. There's no encouragement. Surely he's frustrated because the kids won't step out and do that. That's because they don't have role models that have been playing in front of them to encourage them to get out there and do it. Like now, Jan asked can you guys come up? Says, well, I can mention it. One guy lost his hearing. The other guy, the drummer, lost his legs, knees. Our bass player doesn't have his instruments, and he said, well, if I come out, I want to make sure I do it more than just once. I told him, well, some of us have to work, because you do have to eat. So that was a big thing. And I see some outstanding talents among our kids that need some encouragement from somewhere, not outside, but somewhere inside. And I see people like Julia Keefe, Meredith Thompson, Morfino, outstanding. They've done this all on their own. Hopefully we could be able to get more of our people. That we have a couple others that have so much talent, it's not even funny, and they don't even pursue it. They don't even pursue it. And if we could get them convinced to come in and maybe have workshops. That's the thing that we talked about before. Maybe we need to encourage the kids in the school for workshops. That's where you can get them and have a captive audience. But if your school doesn't support it, if the people who are in charge of the institutions don't do that, and if you have people who have 10 ears that are trying to be in the background going to help out, that doesn't accomplish anything. You need to be able to get proven commodities down there so that these kids have something they can really latch on to. Because the Merediths and Julias of our tribal world are there, but they've not had the opportunity of stepping out and doing these things. Where's my daughter Janelle? Is she in here? Classically trained pianist. She and her younger brother, Ezra, both classically trained pianists. I don't think they've touched a keyboard in 10, 15 years. And they had high marks from their instructors. And there are others They're not, I'm singling them out only because they're convenient to look at them, but there are others in the city of Lapwai, and Shell knows who they are, Shirley knows who they are. Somehow we've got to get to the point of maybe using stuff that Jan has done as a stepping stone. What you're suggesting then would be, yeah, I've seen it in the inner city. I've seen it through the churches, and one of the ironies, talking about Uncle Ty and my father, in their later years, toward the end of their lives, they turned to Pentecostal music as a way of expressing themselves, because the genre that they were used to was dead. There's nothing to support that. The people around them disappeared. Time takes care of that. And so they instead went to a medium that would take them in and move what they had learned, and they could hear that. We used to go to the camp meetings and listen to Uncle Ty and his saxophone. And we would get a case of beer among half a dozen of us, and we'd go out there in the hillside over the camp meeting and just to listen to our Uncle Ty play the sax. That was our entertainment. And those are the kind of things that you look toward. Sylvester Kane, Duke Kane. He had so much to offer. He would have helped. He said, I would have helped out, but someone needs to talk to me, let me know. So what Shirley is saying, kids get together. Somebody has to come around and to support that and have some sort of a formal measuring stick, a benchmark to allow that, to happen. We're missing out. There's a lot of them. Like I say, we don't even have a school band. At one time, we had a real good school band. No? And I see other schools where the adults actually help them out. And I think that's pretty neat. You get someone that can play and tune an instrument, whether it's a guitar or whether it's a set of drums, and help out the kids so that eventually they can do it themselves. That's all it takes. Encouragement. It's lacking.
I want to ask about, there's a long tradition of music, of course, of the Nez Perces and other Titope in the plateau. Just wondered if you might relate that, because, people have their own songs for generations upon generation, and then there's a powerful tradition of singing in the churches. And do you think that may have also contributed to the musicality that became also the Nez Persians?
There are some piano players, I guess, people, good vocalizers. Brian, I know that what Loretta was talking about at other reservation bands, I know in Pendleton, there was a lot of those folks down there that played with the Nez Percians. Walter Pond, Art Botanic, Joe Johnson, they, one of the Minthorns, they were all accomplished musicians also. But they never had mention or opportunity, or they're not mentioned anywhere. And they were excellent. And vocalizers, people that were vocalists, Caroline Botanic, she actually sat in a couple sessions and sang with the Nez Percians. That did Joyce White from Lapwai. So there are different ones had the opportunity, and Caroline's still here yet. But her father was Art Botanic, he was a vocalizer and a half. You heard the name Rob Roy, who was a famous regional baritone opera. He was the only one that could come in and take over for Art when they did the Indian Love Call at the Happy Canyon. Pendleton Roundup. That took somebody with operatic training. Art didn't have that. He just had that kind of a voice. Rob Roy was someone who came from that background and training, and he was a local boy, and he came in and picked it up, so forth. But he was in awe of Art for being able to do that. Somehow he had that ability following that. And so, and he was a sax player, was he a sax player?
Mhm.
Yeah, saxophonist. And he was a big man, big voice, delivery, entertainer. He could really sing. He's never been given any accolades for his skills. Others down there, and then in Yakima, there were a number of people there who were excellent musicians, but they were mainly with institutions, that were playing there. Coeur d'Alene is a place where they had a lot of good musicians. A lot of good musicians in Coeur d'Alene. What's his name? Old man Arepa.
Felix?
Lawrence.
No, one is still alive yet.
Felix.
Louis? Is it
Felix.
Felix. He remembers these guys, because one of the Nez Perceans was Ralph Scannon.
Yeah.
Ralph Lee, they call him Ralph Lee. And he was one of those that wore the war bonnet, and he was a saxophonist. And he was the one who used to complain all the time because he'd sweat. And then their dad, Fox, used to play the drums, and he would not want to wear that war bonnet because he just would drench himself. He didn't want to ruin the war bonnet. And so he was out there, and Ralph said, well, I don't have to wear one either. He said, no, everyone in the front has to, And this guy, I could hear them even now talking about those things. But the Coeur d'Alene folks had some excellent musicians also, and they would take the time to come in. There were other people on the reservation also that from Orofino and Kamiah that would take time to sit in, but they couldn't leave their jobs in the sawmills or things that they were doing there at distances, especially in the wintertime. They could not just come down the road and jump on and go different places with them, but they were very awfully skilled musicians. Later on they did, but the churches were some of the places but these were not gospel churches. It took them a long time to go from the Old Testament to the New Testament style of music, because they had to start some. My grandfather's got a tape over here with Dr. Olson at Wazoo. He did those songs, the Old Testament songs, where they actually, without books or without a piano, without any music, they would sing these songs. They would make up themselves, or they'd hear it from, not evangelists, but I guess some other religious people, and they would then transpose that in their mind and sing it. And so to this day, there are a couple of those songs that are heard in the longhouses, longhouse songs, because they couldn't speak our language, and so they end up using the melody. And so now they use them as part of the longhouse songs. And later on, then when they transferred from the Old Testament to the New Testament, then they brought in the songbooks and so forth, and so you can imagine some of the problems they had, because the people couldn't read English. Couldn't speak English, and they were told that the way that they were following that, you had to do it this way, now it's accepted. And so then you had people that had to learn how to play, and some of those people came out of the boarding schools or out of the missionaries would teach them. My mother was one of them. So all she played were just songs out of the red book and the black book and the green book, that's all she played. So my father could play that also, but it was just one of the things they could do. But mother, it's all she played. A number of them, it's all they played was just church music.
You said the one composition was the Indian Love Call.
What's that?
The one composition, that was the Indian Love Call?
That was Nelson Eddy's song. Jeanette MacDonald, Nelson Eddy. They took that.
You don't want to do that for us now.
Me? I can't sing like that. You can. No. That Art Mechanic, he had a voice. And you heard that voice. You immediately sensed that this was a guy that was special. I mean, he would sing those songs that had guys that come up to the big microphone and stand up there and introduce them, and they would sing. That's all they would do. Then back away, let the band play. That's the kind of skill that he had, and it was all stuff that he just naturally could do that. And people swore that he had opera training. He didn't. But Rob Roy swore up and down. And said, where'd this guy come from? He's from out there in a reservation. He's a cowboy. How did he learn to sing like that? And Rob Roy's a cowboy, but he went away to school, come back and as an opera entertainer, baritone. So he took that over. But that came from that Nelson Eddy, that song there, the Mounties and all that, so. It was quite a transition. The different things that we'd see as kids, we'd laugh about that, We'd be out there riding horses out in the backcountry there in Blue Mountains, and we'd try to sing like that and crack each other up. No way we could do that. We couldn't even do cattle call like Eddie Arnold. Yeah, some of those classics, way back in the 20s, 30s, it was hard to get people to sing like that anymore. But he would sing them, and he'd bring them into a modern dance. And he literally, just like watching, the Elvis with these women, or Frank Sinatra, the women would swoon. His voice, and his wife was from Spalding, and she'd always say, "Oh, Art, don't sing like that." Well, you couldn't help it, She'd, Myrtle Evans, Myrt would just get all upset. "Oh, Art, don't sing like that," because he'd just be out there, and he'd say, "Oh my goodness," they'd just love it. Only time they'd hear music would be only time they'd hear that kind of music would be on the radio. And for someone to be singing to you live like that, with, what's that old guy with them? They have that.
Rudy Valley?
Rudy Valley, yeah, using that thing. He used to take that, and he would get the words out there and start singing, but then pretty soon he wouldn't need it. And then they'd have the mic later on, big mic. It was just amazing. And you take it all for granted. And now that I think about it, it's amazing. The voice was just a gem. It's just something that you never hear again for a long while.
One more question? Sure.
My name is Mark Whitman. It's my dad from Silas, but I can remember when I was a little boy, I got to live, it's like my dad said, just took me back. I was just a kid, and my sister was all there like I was. We were tiptoeing around and lived in a single trailer, about half size of this room. And my dad and them, Uncle Delco, Leroy and them, Chan Reynolds, Holt boys, be in our packs in a little single white trailer, would be like about 6, 7, 8 of them. We'd be jamming out big time. And so I'd run, "Dad, play that song, Dad." Green Onions. Every time I remember hearing Green Onions, going back to the day, the souls that they're practicing. But that was pretty cool living that part of life, being a young kid, like Dad said, about him growing with my grandpa and them, all the great uncles and all this. Pretty good how that generation goes on. And then listening to my nieces and nephews and my sister and them, I used to be so jealous because my dad and I, we lived in Boise, Idaho. When I was 10 years old. "Okay, son, come sit down. Father-son time. What you gonna do now? You're gonna play sports, or you're gonna go to music. You're not gonna be a knucklehead running around with your cousin back home." I'm thinking, what am I gonna do? Pay for everything for you. Music or sports, and what do? And I love my ball and everything. There's people that know me, your family and all. But man, I'm thinking, God, I should have went sport or music. I mean, all the backstories that we're hearing now, and then like my sisters did, and nieces and nephews now, it's just amazing watching them get in, grabbing a piano, organ, or other instruments. Because when I was in 4th grade in Canada, I grabbed some horns, I took music, I snuck in there with my buddy Jimmy Oatman. He snuck me in there, I was in 4th grade, and I learned to play 5 horns, 5 separate horns, bass drum, snare drum, and of all things I couldn't get was a saxophone. Because I had to talk about a saxophone, I hated it, but man, it's such a beautiful instrument. But living that life to go from music was pretty unreal. And hearing stories is something else. Your brother, pastor, the people.
Great. Well, it seems like a reunion in. Oh, got another question. Yay.
I just had to add to my brother. I'm Ernie Whitman. I'm Silas' eldest daughter. And I have a daughter she's 23 now, but at the age of 6, I bought her a keyboard for her birthday one year, and I think it's something that's just innate in family. So she sat down at the keyboard and started playing, and the first time I heard her play, mom was watching First Wives Club, and she was with her grandmother that day. And after the movie, like my daughter was playing, but she was listening to the movie, to the music on there. And she went upstairs to the keyboard, and my mom heard this music, and she called up there to Silas, and she was, "Is that you?" And she's like, "Yeah." I thought she was in trouble. And she's like, "Are you playing that song from the movie?" "Yeah." "Did you just learn that?" "Yeah." And she's up there playing, and same thing with the clarinet. She picked the clarinet and started playing Spill the Wine that she heard on a commercial. And I said, "Is that something you're learning in band?" "No." That time she was 9. I said, "Is that something you heard somewhere on the radio?" She said, "On a commercial." "And you just start playing it?" "Yeah." Same when I bought her an acoustic guitar 3 years ago for her Christmas, because she wanted to learn to play flamenco music. And this girl's teaching herself how to play the acoustic guitar. No lessons. She had no lessons for 4 years. And now she still plays, but she'll only play in private. She's really shy. And but it's something I think that's just, like I said, it's innate in us all somewhere, but it's something that maybe genetic, picked it up somewhere, but can play by ear music, and you just go sit down and start playing something. And it's amazing to me how they can do that, children can do that, and become adults and be amazing musicians. So I just wanted to add.
Angel, thank you.
You know, Silas talked about having the role models, musician role models, and of course I remember just the little, seeing the bands, and, but as a little girl I remember seeing that, and I wish that all of our kids could have that same memory where but we need those role models to continue to come out so that it becomes a natural sight for them to see. But I brought my 4-year-old to the Blind Boys of Alabama to the jazz festival, and she told me she wanted to be like that, one of those guys playing an instrument. And so I just want to know, of course we have Arthur here with U of I. Brian's over there, he's a piano player too. Because of funding cuts and stuff at the school, they really can't take field trips. And so possibly with Arthur's help and other U of I people, we could hopefully, expose them to the jazz festival up here. Of course, Lionel Hampton used to go down to there. I don't think they go down there anymore. But our kids really can't go up anywhere. There's no field trip expenses. So I think the U of I could be a strong partner in becoming the role model and getting our kids to come to the jazz festival.
Absolutely. We can work on that for sure, can't we, Arthur?
No pressure.
Too good. Travel.
All right. Well, and also when you talk about the McCaddy children and Duke Kane's relatives, it seems like we should really work to get a reunion together in Lapway, where it'd be a lot easier for more of the band members' families to get together, and then maybe some of these grandchildren surely would put a band together for that event, because they'd have an event to plan for, right? See?
Yeah, if that they can do for my 70th birthday.
Right, when's your 70th birthday?
You got 4 years, Arthur, all of you.
All right. Well, I want to thank Shirley and Silas and Loretta so much for coming up to talk with us. Thank you. And for all of you for coming, thank you very much. And Rodney for hosting us. And if you'd like to take a careful look at Shirley's photographs, they're really, really beautiful. So, and if you'd like to meet them, please come on up too.